with you. The Grandy Group, mornings 5 to 9 on 630 WMAL.
8:37 on the Grandy Group. It's Brian Neiman and Fred Grandy.
Not even bad weather and appalling traffic can keep us from this interview. This is a gentleman we have wanted to talk to for a long time. He is the new chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, Peter King of Long Island, who announced shortly after he became the chairman, and I'm reading from a piece he wrote in Newsday in December, he wants to hold hearings on a wide range of issues, including the radicalization of the American Muslim community and homegrown terrorism. For this, he has been vilified this is a short list, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and the Washington Post. Yet he joins us this morning. Mr. Chairman, thanks for being here.
Fred, good to be with you. How you been?
I'm good, but I got to tell you, regardless of what kind of editorial criticism you're getting from the mainstream media, there are a lot of people that listen to this show who are big supporters of yours and applauding this effort and think it's long overdue.
Well, it's good to hear, Fred, because I just believe this is one of those issues that whatever you, certainly even talking to law enforcement, when I talk to them privately, I would say every police officer, federal law enforcement officer, high-ranking police official, they just assume that they're not going to get cooperation for the Muslim community. I asked them for any examples where they do get it. They said they just don't get it. They don't expect to get it. If occasionally it might come along, they feel they're lucky. But bottom line is they go into every investigation assuming they're going to get no cooperation. And also we know that at the same time, Al-Qaeda is actively recruiting here in the United States. Even Eric Holder said he lies awake at night because thinking of all the young Muslim men who are being recruited and who are willing to take up arms against their own country.
But you know as well as I do, because you've been really in the crossfire of this. Anytime you criticize Islam, you're called Islamophobic. And one of the things we've tried to do on this program, and I hope you'll be doing in your hearings, is draw the distinction between the religion and the political movement, which is clearly operating against the United States and the Constitution.
Absolutely. There is a political wing of Islam, or people who are of the Islamic faith, who are affiliated with or support radical action against the United States, who are supportive of terrorism. I'm never one of those ones who points to anything in the Quran or talks about Muslim teachings as being anti-American. But there's no doubt there's people who have, in the Muslim faith, who have co-opted part of the Muslim community for themselves. And to me, this is not against the Muslim religion. It's against the ideology of jihad, which unfortunately too many Muslims have adopted. Now, I don't know, probably 99% of the Muslim community are good Americans. But the fact is, for whatever reason, whether it's cultural or whatever, they do not come forward and cooperate to the extent that they should. Now, even though I said 99%, I believe are good Americans, there was a poll just about 2 or 3 years ago, the Pew poll, I think it said 15% of Islamic men between 18 and 29 could support suicide bombing here in the United States. So that's that is troubling. But again, the main issue here is that I think it should be debated. The media, the mainstream media, has put just a blackout on this. They just if you mention anything about the lack of cooperation, if you talk about the recruiting of people in the Muslim community, they accuse me and anyone else of Islamophobia, and it's so wrong. And there's been so many cases recently.
Let me ask you about the lack of cooperation. CARE recently had a poster in their California chapter said, build a wall of resistance and don't talk to the FBI. What do you make of that poster, and is there a way to somehow turn that tide, especially within CARE?
I don't know. CARE, what bothers me is that CARE is quoted and cited as if it's a mainstream organization. The fact is, CARE was named as an unindicted co-conspirator in a terrorist Holy Land Foundation case. Yeah. We start with that. Secondly, that poster in California put out by, I guess, the San Francisco office of CARE was not that unusual for, unfortunately, too many Muslim organizations. And now CARE in Washington, the national office did tell them to stop using that poster. But in doing it, they said, we're doing it out of an overabundance of caution because it might be subject to misinterpretation. How can you possibly say that could be subject to misinterpretation? So it's a very, even when they go through the motions of saying they do want to cooperate, it's done with so much so much reluctance, and they're really, to me, sending a signal not to cooperate.
Congressman, one of the organizations that seems to be kind of the umbrella organization we've talked a lot about on our program as we brought up this subject is the Muslim Brotherhood, which, of course, as you probably know from Long Island, has operated out of Islamic centers, and at least from what I can tell from the research I've done, is clearly moving a political agenda. Will they be part of your hearing process?
We will be. I don't intend right now to have a witness in the Muslim Brotherhood. We will certainly have witnesses commenting on them and analyzing them and showing the concern that I think we should have about them. And especially when you tie that in with the fact, as I was starting to say before, Al-Qaeda has realized it's very, very difficult to attack the United States from the outside. I mean, certainly it would be very difficult to have another 9/11 type attack. So what they are doing is they are recruiting actively, and we saw whether it's Major Hassan at Fort Hood, whether it was Zazi, the subway bomber in New York, Shahzad, the Times Square bomber in New York, recent cases in Baltimore, in Texas, in Chicago, in New Jersey, in the Bronx. I mean, these are all Portland, Oregon. So it's changed, and recruiting is done by Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Some of these people are self-starters. They're going online, and they're being very influenced by Al-Awlaki. So, and they're picking people who are underneath the radar screen, people who are living here legally. And that's all the more reason why we have to have the support of people in the community to let us know when there's any aberration at all.
But I would think some of those people would be afraid to come forward because of the pressure either within the mosque or the Islamic Center or the community.
Well, that's true. And there was several years ago in Minneapolis where young Somali Americans were being recruited to be suicide bombers by al-Shabaab. Families in Minneapolis went to law enforcement. They wanted something done about it. The FBI began an investigation, and imams in the mosque instructed their people not to cooperate. Now, it's bad enough that the imam did that. I don't know if any other imams or Muslim leaders around the country who denounced that, who came forward and said, no, we do want you to cooperate. It is important that you cooperate.
But do you think that the number of radical Muslims in this country, you mentioned all the arrests lately, is the FBI getting better at finding them, or are there just more radical Muslims now in this country?
No, to me it's clear there's more radical Muslims because these were active attacks that were stopped at the very last minute, or in some cases like Shahzad and Major Hassan, they couldn't stop them, but certainly the subway bomber in New York, and then a number of cases recently, Baltimore, Portland, others were stopped.
Congressman, I sympathize with you because you seem to be kind of caught in a cultural war right now, but from what we know from the news and just looking at the spread of radical Islam around the world, you got to admit it's a lot easier to be a Muslim in New York or London than it is to be a Christian in Cairo or now Tunis or anywhere else. And yet that seems to be lost whenever secular criticism of the political side of Islam is brought up.
No, there's actually no comparison the way Christians are treated in the Muslim world and the way Muslims are treated in the United States or England and the Western world. In fact, Muslims probably have much better lives here than they do in their own countries.
Absolutely.
Or countries that they came from. Yeah, it's really there's not been enough of an assimilation. Maybe I don't know what the issue is there. And I had very good relations with the Muslim community before September 11th. Maybe there were certain things I didn't notice or recognize, but I was certainly taken by surprise afterwards. And then I found out it just wasn't mosques in my area. As I asked around the country and certainly around New York State, I got the same reaction from the police and from law enforcement. And again, if I had announced that I was going to do let's say if after the tragic shooting in Tucson, I had announced a full committee hearing investigation into right-wing militias, into hate groups, into white supremacist groups, I would have been praised by the New York Times, the Washington Post about how enlightened I was, even though there's maybe one or two people involved. Here we have a whole community being radicalized or an attempt being made to radicalize within an entire community. And when I say, and they're working for a foreign enemy, and I say that's to be investigated, denounced. Now, being attacked doesn't bother me, but it does show what we are up against.
Congressman King, great to have you on the program. Thanks so much.
Grandy Group will always have your back on this one, Congressman. So if the press goes after you, you can always come here.
Great, thank you, Fred. Thank you, Brian.
Peter King here on the Grandy Group, chairman of the House Homeland Security.